All right, this is an update of Fabber version 1.1.4. So if you hit the question mark on your Fabber toolbar, to use this new feature, you're going to need this version. So what is new? We have fixed some bugs under the hood, made things a little faster, made file saving a little better. We don't get those weird extensions that are in there now. But the big headline feature is subcomponents. And so we've had users that have been asking for this. And what this is the ability to use components within components. And that may sound confusing, but it's actually pretty simple. And I'll show you how it works. So this is the sawhorse that comes with the Fabber starter kit. And this uses basic SketchUp components. So you can see there are some parts of this sawhorse that repeat themselves. And those are made into components. So these stretchers, they're 3 identical stretchers. And if you double click on any of the stretchers and you make an edit to one, that edit happens to each one of the stretchers that are in the model. And that's because this is a standard SketchUp component. This is great for repeating things. And these sawhorses have these weld nut slots in them. This is where you put this weld nut in, and then you can put a bolt in through the other side and tighten it up. I'm just going to go ahead and delete this weld nut here to show you what's going on. And the way you would have had to create this previously is you would have had to go in here. Let's say we want to create another slot right here. You'd have to go in and create the slot like this, and then Fabber would pick that up and make you, in this case, a pocket tool path for that. Now, as you can see on this stretcher, we have the same slot on both sides. So in the previous version, you would have had to draw this slot manually on both sides. So now we've made this a lot faster. So just to kind of illustrate the point, we'll sort of erase this here. So if I make a change to this slot, let's say I want to make it a little deeper, I could do something like this. Make it a little deeper. You can see that change is here, but it's not over here. So you can imagine that this inconvenience scales when you have a more complex object. Just on this sawhorse alone, there's about 8 of these slots that you'd have to go change manually if you had like a different piece of hardware or a larger bolt or something like that. So this is how subcomponents work. So what we've created down here, and I'll show you in a moment how to make these, but we made a component out of this weld nut slot. And what happens when you make a component is this ends up in your component browser in SketchUp. So you can go select a component and it will be put in. And you can select it as many times as you want and drop it in place. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this weld nut slot component to put a repeating subcomponent in our parts. So on this sawhorse here, you can see that there are no slots on it right now. I'm going to double click on this stretcher here. And again, remember, whatever we do to one of these stretchers happens to all of them. So I'm going to go get this weld nut slot that's over here, and I'm just going to kind of arbitrarily click it in the model. Actually, I'm going to I'll put it right where it belongs here. So we'll put it over here, and this snaps in place, and you can see that this component cuts the slot that is needed for this bolt without having to do anything. So I'm going to do the same thing here. We will have to rotate this around like this, and I will go grab, get it to snap right here, and place this, and now we have another slot. Now, the neat thing about these slots is these slots are also components. So I'm just going to hide the other parts here. So if I go in to this slot, and let's see if we can see both of them here, and I want to make this one, if I want to make a change to this one, you can see that change happens to both of them. So I made the slot a little bit shallower, a little bit less deep over here. And the change happens over here. And so I can edit any one of these components, and whatever I do to one happens to the other. So this can be great if you have lots of drill holes, lots of the same kind of pockets or cutouts or any other feature that is in your model that you want to have repeat. So let's walk through the process of making one of these things. So here I've got this cabinet, and let's say I wanted to make a pocket for like a Blum style hinge, and you essentially have a pocket like this that you would route out, and then you can snap and fasten your Blum hinge in there. So the way to do that, it's a couple steps. It's not that hard once you see it done once, but essentially you would do this. So I'm going to make a circle that represents the diameter of the Blum pocket. I'm just going to bring this up. I'm not doing these to the exact dimensions. This is just for an example. And I'm going to select all of this and do make component. So if you've been making components for Fabber, this process is pretty similar up to this point. I'm going to call this Blum Cup Hinge. And probably you guys have all been doing this, but what you haven't done is this here. So I'm going to select glue to, and I'm going to say any. And then I'm going to say set component axes. And this is an important step. So you can see this gray plane that's created. We actually want to move that to the top of this component. So you can do that. I'm going to find the center here. So I'm going to make it so that this gray plane is now on top of this Blum hinge. I'm also going to check off cut opening. And this is also a critical step. Make sure that replace selection with component is checked off, and I'm going to hit create. And so now if we go into, if you don't have this open here, if you go to window and you go to components, it's going to bring up this dialog here. Just get rid of some of these other ones. We don't need styles right now. If we look through here, we're going to see we have this Blum cup hinge component that we created. And one last thing I'm going to do this. I'm just going to double click on this one and select this face and just delete it so it's open on the top. So now I'm going to go over to my cabinet door, and I'm going to double click to go inside the component. So I'm now editing this component, and we can tell because I'm now able to select the face and the lines, and you kind of see its origin point over here. And what I'm going to do is in the component browser, click on the Blum Cup Hinge and go ahead and place it in here like this. And you'll see because I deleted that top face, I selected glue to any, and I selected cut opening. This component now will cut an opening no matter where I place it. So pretty neat. You can actually change the insertion points of these components as well. You can see I've done a pretty sloppy job at placing these in here, and that certainly would not work right for something like a Blum hinge. And you can actually get creative the way that you set these things up. So if I right click this and I say change axes, I can actually move this to like a meaningful point on my part. So if I double click, you see I've made the origin sort of off to the side. It's on the same plane, but what that'll do is now when we go into these components, it'll be offset from my mouse pointer that exact amount, and you'll now be able to go in and have these things evenly spaced exactly off of the side of the cabinet door. And in this case, you'd probably want to use some of the built-in, SketchUp tools, so you can drop like a construction line. In the case of a hinge like this, you might want to be very particular, about where you put it, like this. And the nice thing is that if you maybe make a test part or a door and you decide you want to adjust the offset a little bit, you can actually click into these things, and if you move it, they all move, which is really nice. Or if you want to alter the depth of one, so let's say it turns out we needed this thing a little shallower, that change will affect both of them. But let's get to the good part. So now, when I select this door and I hit our Fabber export button, so we'll go in here and we'll say door export test, like this, and let's go find that door and see what it looks like. Exported, and sometimes when these come up in Illustrator, the lines are a little bit thin, so we'll just thicken those up so we can see the detail. And there you have it. You've got the cup hinges that are perfectly placed. They're subcomponents, and they're all on the correct layers, and everything's good to go. And so this is, again, you need to have version 1.1.4 or later to use this. So I hope you enjoy the new update, and let us know if you have any questions.